A powerful evening for the glorious and mighty. Well, it seems like Europe is planning to expel migrants, mostly those who behave badly, and they're planning to expel them by the thousands. This is being reported today, so let's get started. Before we begin, please subscribe to this wonderful channel, and a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Take a look. All year, European countries have been tightening migration laws. This has never happened before, and here we go again, and now in Sweden, they can revoke residence permits for bad behavior. It should be noted that this is not only happening in Sweden. In Poland, for example, several hundred migrants have already been deported for violating not only the laws, but also behavioral norms that do not align with those commonly accepted in Poland. For example, they deported a person who caught some legendary catfish in a lake in the middle of a Polish city, and he even bragged about it, showed the video, and wasn't going to listen to anyone, but he didn't listen, and they kicked him out. Then one of these guys drank and drove drunk to pick up his daughter from kindergarten. He was deported too. Here, though, it's not clear what happened to the daughter, because after all, it's a family, and there must be a mother there too. At least I hope so. In general, of course, there are some difficulties here. All these isolated cases are now turning into a swelling stream, so to speak. These drops are merging into a full-flowing stream, and Europe is starting to take action. In mid-June, the new European Pact on Migration and Asylum came into force. Now getting asylum in the European Union will be more difficult than before. And people who are denied protection will be deported to safe third countries. It should be noted that among the safe third countries, I believe Rwanda is on the list, so anything can happen. At the same time, over the past year, many European countries have gone even further and have additionally tightened their own migration policies. 3 trends can be identified in these changes. Firstly, the authorities want to make it easier to deport migrants. Secondly, they aim to keep asylum seekers not on their own territory, but somewhere else. Thirdly, the states want to reduce the attractiveness of European countries for newcomers. Well, and this concerns countries like Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, and the Netherlands. Yes, you can still ask your question to the Ministry of Rotary Affairs. For example, I myself live in Spain, and there is also a problem with migrants here. However, not everyone receives benefits. But nevertheless, if before, when I just arrived in 2014, I think, and people were telling me, and it was very difficult to get documents for a residence permit for permanent residency, now I am already a citizen of this wonderful country. But well, the path was certainly not easy. While I was handling everything, confirming accounts, purchases, calculating my stay, my expenses were being paid in Spain. Is it true that I wasn't going anywhere there, not doing anything suspicious? At the same time, other migrants from other countries, I won't name them so YouTube doesn't flag this, all they had to do was lose their passport, and that was it. Then they were given, well, not a passport, but still Spanish documents, along with benefits. These are not Ukrainians, I should note, along with food, drinks, including for children, and everything else. Many people were not eager to work, though, and this was, well, 10 years ago, or however long it's been. It was surprising because many people showed up who neither knew how nor wanted to do anything. Apparently, Europe now wants to avoid incidents like this, but I'd like to ask, what were you thinking before? Honestly, I used to ask myself this question before, but now there are even more strange things coming up. In short, look, now you can be expelled from the country for bad behavior. On June 12 of this year, the Swedish authorities passed a law that allows migrants to be deprived of their residence permits for bad behavior. The new measures will impact as many as 118,000 people, many who've lived in the country for over a decade. At the same time, examples of such bad behavior are being discussed. For example, this includes not paying taxes, not paying debts, criminal activity, and connections with extremist organizations. Here I just want to exclaim, really? For heaven's sake, how long? Questions arose regarding the activity, and then suddenly this kind of decision appeared. Working without proper documentation and fraud related to social benefits. There are also many questions here about why this wasn't dealt with earlier, but apparently the government and officials had their own reasons that prevented them from acting in accordance with the spirit and letter of at least those laws that used to be in effect. At the same time, the deputies voted for a law that the Swedish media called the snitch law. It requires all officials to report illegal migrants to the authorities. In Sweden, the number is also small, from 30 to 50,000. Initially, this applied to teachers and doctors as well, but then they said, no, you can relax, we'll extend this only to officials. In the international Swedish legal organization, understandably, they got agitated and started criticizing, saying that officials are creating an atmosphere where people won't understand which actions or expressions could be used against them. But here it's worth noting that if a person doesn't understand that social benefit fraud is bad, and that not paying taxes at all is also not good, and even more so, participating in extremist organizations is extremely frowned upon. But that leaves one question. Is there something wrong with a person who doesn't understand all this? I think a reasonable person always understands everything perfectly well. Well, those who don't understand are either pretending or, well, let's just leave further discussion aside. As for third countries besides Rwanda, Albania has also suddenly appeared among these third countries. Italy has decided to send migrants there who are waiting. Permission to obtain asylum in this beautiful sunny country? In February 2026, Giorgia Meloni's government adopted a security decree, part of which was dedicated to migration. Mamma mia, an Italian might exclaim. And not only them, as the document itself simplified the deportation procedure and increased the number of centers for migrants who were denied asylum and are awaiting deportation. The maximum term was raised from 1 year to 18 months. According to the decree, lawyers of migrants who help return their clients to their homeland can expect a bonus for each person who leaves. Can you imagine that's how it is? 615 euros isn't something you just find lying around. If you convince 10 people to leave, you put 6,000 in your own pocket. As Italian human rights activists point out, this regulation contradicts the ethical standards of the legal profession. Well, obviously it's probably that deputies and lawyers don't want to get money, they don't like money, and they work purely out of principle. Well, actually, as I mentioned, what kind of deputies, just like other wonderful officials? But here you can only ask, are the people who think that the bar law, or rather the lawyer's ethics, prevent making a profit and the desire for money, really, okay? That's wonderful. However, the main Italian know-how is the migrant centers in Albania. In November 2023, Giorgia Meloni and the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, signed an agreement that allowed Italy to establish 2 specialized centers on Albanian territory. Rama's subordinates or fellow citizens are probably very, very grateful to him. The centers were built, but once again they didn't start operating fully. Then they started changing something there again, but even now the number of people going through this very center is extremely small. There are only 70 people in it, even though the center itself is designed for 3,000 people. Effective management, the money has been spent, the camp has been built, but who is inside, right? Just sit there and don't make a sound. Can you imagine a camp for 3,000 people and there are only 70 people there? They must feel great. The only thing missing is a tumbleweed like you sometimes see in movies and cartoons. When a person walks by, and to emphasize how empty the place is, they show a tumbleweed rolling by. Well, that's probably about the same thing there. France wants to fight more effectively against those crossing the English Channel, and they say it's better to control migrants at the external borders. The United Kingdom has started sending back to France those who cross the English Channel from France. The British authorities have committed to quickly accepting the same number of migrants who are in France and have grounds for relocation. For example, as part of family reunification with relatives who are already in the United Kingdom. Well, but here in general, the British are acting just as expected. And the new Prime Minister, who will probably replace and outshine the great Starmer, also says that, well, we will deal with migrants there, we will help Ukraine, and we will support migrants. So basically, the policy doesn't really change. By June 2026, under the agreement, 921 people had been sent back to France, and 796 migrants arrived legally in the UK, swapped one problem for another, and probably feel very happy. Here, all that's left is to salute those who participated in drafting this bill. As the saying goes, they talked and talked, made a fuss, and ended up crying. Wonderful people. Look, well, if you think about the intricacies of drafting such documents, you think they probably spent quite a bit of money on this. They held meetings, organized all sorts of conferences, and visited each other. Well, I mean to transmit important information through oral, so to speak, communication, that is negotiations. And then suddenly they passed the law, and probably they're still working on it. As a result, both lawyers and officials at various levels are getting paid. Well, all that's left here is to envy the resourcefulness of the officials. Then, Doctors Without Borders called the agreement between the countries a cynical deal concerning human lives. Well, let those doctors try living, for example, in a neighborhood with all these wonderful people. Maybe they do live there, of course, but anyway, I was in a city where there were a lot of them, and it was very interesting. It was an extremely interesting experience. Honestly, when I stopped my bus in front of the store near my house, I thought they'd steal the tires in the first 2 seconds. No, it looks like they didn't steal them. In the UK, they're also planning to charge asylum seekers. Apparently, they're trying to make money too. There will be a total compensation amount as well, though. And it can reach up to £10,000 sterling. This is part of a bill that deals with reimbursing the costs of asylum seekers' accommodation and benefits. That is, if they pay for all this, but only after they start working and earning money, they may end up owing quite a significant amount. Those who are denied asylum and deported will also have to pay the money back. But here you can only envy those who wrote this law and look at those from another country, not a European one, that has no legal or other ties to Europe, and see who will actually pay. Like some immigrant from some hypothetical place, let's say A. Ust-Zajopinsk from some remote continent. It would be interesting to see how he rushes to the bank, if there are even banks in his country, to wire money to the UK for his stay there. Well, I think it's funny. Maybe it's only funny to me. Maybe I'm the only one who understands that no one is going to pay. But it's extremely interesting. Germany no longer lets people in without documents. This is a really serious restriction here. And Alexander Dobrin, the Minister of Internal Affairs, gave an order that border guards must deny entry to migrants without documents, including asylum seekers. Apparently, Germany had the same thing going on that I described in Spain. When you arrive by boat, by plane, or on foot and you say you lost your passport, you don't remember where you're from, and they give you a generous allowance without any documents. So now they don't give out these documents anymore, at least in Germany. On top of that, the Bundestag also approved measures that for 2 years deprive migrants with limited protection status of the right to family reunification. As a result, can you imagine it's a problem? 380,000 people from Syria lost the opportunity to bring their spouses and children to Germany. It's a pity, really. This violates every legal norm in Europe. We condemn this. It's very bad. In the Netherlands, it's getting harder for migrants to bring relatives. Apparently, it's the same. In April 2026, the country's Senate approved a 2-tier asylum system. Starting from June 12, all applicants will be divided into 2 categories. Status A will be granted to those who fled persecution based on ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation. And Status B is intended for those who escaped from war. Status A allows for family reunification, Status B does not. But there are probably fewer people with Status A than with Status B. At the same time, the residence permit for both categories is reduced from 5 to 3 years, and the system in general has already started working. In general, these are the types of things planned in Europe. As you can see, many are already in place. Write about how these new systems may have affected you, and what do you think about them? It's extremely interesting to hear your opinion. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this wonderful channel. Here, no one is being sent anywhere. The channel even has a chat. Here it is. Point your smartphone or tablet camera at this QR code and you'll get into this wonderful chat. Or in the video description, there's a direct link to the Telegram channel. You just click it, click once with your mouse, and you immediately join the Telegram channel. And we don't deport anyone anywhere. We don't ask anyone for money. I think this is an interesting offer, an oferta, as they say in Spain. It turns out there's still Europe. Today I read something amazing. Lithuania is considering a law about deploying nuclear weapons. If nuclear weapons appear in the Baltics, that will be extremely amusing. Lithuania has agreed to consider a bill that lifts the ban on deploying nuclear weapons in the country. Vilnius and Washington are negotiating the deployment of US nuclear warheads in Lithuania. This bill will be considered. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda announced the amendments during his visit to Berlin. Lithuania is currently negotiating with the US. Supporters of lifting the constitutional ban on deployment in the ruling coalition believe that such measures are necessary due to the changing nature of security threats. It seems that if you give nuclear weapons to such people who are essentially military, the threat to the world actually increases. I wouldn't say that it is decreasing. It's clear who we are. We're just ordinary people. We're not counts, princes, marquises, or barons of the modern internet and the political battles of high society. We're just people who try to think logically. Probably sometimes logical thinking doesn't match the needs of certain state entities, institutions, and organizations. That's just how it is. Currently, we're told that Lithuania is one of the few NATO member states with such restrictions. We can't remain the weak link in the entire deterrence system, says Joaza Soliakas. And they emphasize that repealing the constitutional provision will not affect Lithuania's obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and other international agreements. Understood. The more nuclear weapons there are in different countries, the less all those so-called non-proliferation rules get violated. In addition to the nuclear arming of the Baltic states, it turns out that Europe is already planning to fight Russia, but without America. This is also an extremely interesting statement, especially in light of all these events. They are talking about how the leading military powers of Europe have started discussing things that seemed unthinkable just a year ago. How do you defend the continent without America? No one has been attacked, but it seems they've made some early moves. An early feint maybe to attack somewhere or to go for super defense. In general, it's all pretty intense. A scenario is being seriously considered in which they will have to repel Russian aggression with much less support from Washington, and the reason for this is Trump's own actions. Over the past year, he threatened to take Greenland from Denmark by force and reduce the US military presence in Europe. And he initiated a 6-month review of the American defense configuration on the continent. He also increased tensions by reproaching allies for their lack of support in the war against Iran. We really aren't in the best shape, says an official from France. Now Trump has his own trump card, and that's Iran. Whatever we do, he'll say, NATO wasn't there for us, and then he'll dramatically throw up his hands, just like he always does. He especially blames Spain, by the way, not only for not following America's lead in the conflict with Iran, but also for not allowing the US to deploy its weapons, equipment, and everything else at bases located in Spain. Now Trump is saying that we need to stop trading with Spain, a trade embargo. But so far, nothing is known beyond Trump's own statements, so we'll see what this leads to. What happens next? The defense plan stated that the US would take on about 40% of the burden of waging war in Europe. But now, most likely, Trump will say, sorry. Plus, the American way of waging war is to apply overwhelming force against the enemy's center of gravity and deprive them of the ability to fight. Europeans can't act in the same way. They'll have to interfere, create dilemmas, and build something like a porcupine defense. Ukraine immediately comes to mind here, which is even called the porcupine, the defender of Europe, with the rest of its quills pointed toward Russia. Apparently, they will probably accept it. Maybe the European Union will come up with some kind of status like an associate military member or something else and deploy something. A powerful portrait of a powerful leader in the counterpart, so to speak, of this very organization also tells us that Ukraine's advantage lies in understanding exactly what kind of war needs to be fought. It can adapt and evolve in real time, but anyway. Porcupines stick their quills out and squeeze their eyes shut and rush at full speed toward the enemy wherever he may be, searching for the enemy and stabbing him with their quills. Apparently, the calculations are based on this, which is actually a great plan. I think it would be interesting to see how this is modeled in real life. No, thank you, but I would like to see how this is modeled. Well, that's all. Write what you think about this. There won't be any powerful leaders, so also write what you think, because the episode is about European and Ukrainian leaders. Well, let's leave them for the morning video. There will be a whole bunch of them. Bye, everyone.